Hello, everyone. This is John Drummond here, host of the TNT Show. Now, as you know, most TNT shows go out live. This is an exception. And it's an exception for a very, very good reason indeed. We're going to be talking a couple of seconds to Martin Keatings, who is heading up the Forward as One group, as you may recall, from a time that Martin was our guest some months ago on the TNT Show. But there have been some fantastic and interesting developments since then, and in particular in the last couple of weeks or so. So what we decided to do was to ask Martin to come back and do this special. Now, obviously, because it's not a recording and not live, you won't be able to ask any questions. So you have to trust me to try and think of the right questions on your behalf. But I suspect that what Martin has to tell us in and of itself, without necessarily any embellishments, will be crucial and essential to the independence process. So I'm going to start by asking Martin, please, Martin, could you give us a quick, or not so quick, whatever you feel is appropriate, a recap of where you are now, what has gone before, and then if you could tell us what's happening right now, please.
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, we started off at the tail end of last year by seeking a legal opinion from Aidan O'Neill, who's a QC, well-known QC, excellent legal mind, and we instructed him through our legal counsel with Balfour and Manson. And the question was quite simple. Is it or is it not legal for the Scottish Parliament to legislate for a second referendum without needing the permission of Westminster? Or as we phrase it, the constitutionality of the Scottish Parliament legislating for a second referendum without an order in council under Section 30 of the Scotland Act.
Okay.
Aidan prepared a comprehensive legal opinion, and that came back that there was very good arguments for the Scottish Parliament being able to legislate for its own referendum without Westminster effectively getting a say.
So just a point of interest, how did you fund it? I mean, because legal counsel isn't cheap. I mean, particularly you've got quality people like the guy you just talked about, Aidan. So where did the money come from to do all of this? Are you preventing it yourself, or how is it being done?
Well, the overall case itself is crowdfunded. The initial advice that I saw was off my own back. Okay. So I took a risk on that. And then there was a crowdfund, and the crowdfund has then effectively paid for it. And we've had 2 rounds of crowdfunding because it's a very, very expensive proposition. It's legal action always is, especially when you're talking about the Supreme Courts of Scotland, the Court of Session. So it's a big legal shot, and we've been able to raise in total it was 40-odd thousand in the first run, and we're just shy of 150 in the second run. So that combined has given us quite a big war chest. So the legal opinion was sought. We got that legal opinion, and we put that to the UK government, and we dared them to prove us wrong. And from that point, they came back and says, "No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not." You know, that sort of argument. So at that point, what's the word? A dispute, so to speak, existed. We believed quite reasonably the Scottish Parliament doesn't require consent. The UK government obviously disagrees. At that point, we then filed with the court, and that started the ball rolling, and that happened back in March.
Okay.
And since then, it's been procedural matters. And I've kind of had I was on the show last time. I was able to tell some things, and I was also prevented from talking about other things because in the initial stages, the submissions between the parties until they're finalised in what's called the closed record are very much confidential.
Okay.
We respected that. One of the defenders, unfortunately, didn't, because as we all know, there was a leak to the press during that time with certain things that the Scottish government had said, which were reported in several outlets. But now that the closed record, now that all these items have been stacked together in the closed record, and everything's proceeding, I can talk about it freely now, and I can talk about the substance and everything that's going on.
Please do.
Since the initial
tell us what you couldn't tell us before.
Well, originally, everybody was working under the assumption, and I have to apologise for everybody, to everybody on this. I know that you all felt, the UK government is going to vigorously defend this and vigorously attack this. But what's actually transpired is that the Scottish government, unfortunately, has caused quite a few headaches over the last number of months in terms of slowing it down. But in actual fact, the Advocate General, who represents the UK government, hasn't actually really responded to the substance of the complaint the summons that we put forward, the argument that we've put forward. They've not really responded to that, and they've not come back and says, apart from, it's not within the remit of the Scottish Parliament. That's basically all they've said, but they've not advanced any arguments against what we've said. Instead, their entire focus has been on trying to get it transferred to another mode of procedure within the court to have it kicked, trying to slow it down, trying to stop it, trying to get it kicked out, trying to get it dismissed. The substantive arguments in the overarching case, they've not bothered to really address.
Why do you think that is, Martin?
Well, we've actually asked for what's called an order de pleno, which effectively means unarguable, and a summary judgment in our favour because the other side hasn't argued anything. So the reason we're asking for that is because we believe it is unarguable. Our position is strong. We have stated categorically it is within the legislative competence of the Scottish Parliament to have a second referendum on independence.
Yeah.
And we put it to the UK government and dared them to prove otherwise.
Yeah.
And we believe that they simply can't. The position is unarguable. And certainly the submissions that they've put forward, which are all a list of, it should be dismissed for this reason, it should be dismissed for this reason, it should be dismissed for this reason. All of those are just bluster. They actually make, in the overarching complaint, they're not arguing against what we said in the original opinion way back in December, January. So
now, to the layperson, that will sound astonishing, because people who don't know much about constitutions or legal matters will be thinking, hold on a second, they must have a huge arsenal of arguments that they can bring to the table. Are they simply keeping their powder dry, or do you feel that they genuinely do not have a case? I mean, I take it that's why you've instigated the arrangements you just mentioned.
Well,
to require them to present it.
Their opinion that they've put forward are things like what they call the pleas in law, which are effectively what they ask the court to do. The first, there's I believe it's 7 or 9 pleas in law for the Advocate General, which is the UK government's counsel. And the first 3 are, it's academic, it's hypothetical, it's premature.
Yeah.
Now, for us to ask this question. On academic, the reason they say it's academic is because there's no bill currently pending before the Scottish Parliament for a referendum on independence. Well, the Scottish National Party have announced that a draft bill's coming forward, so it's no longer academic.
Right.
It's premature. Well, we've been told that this so-called draft bill is supposed to come forward in March, so well, it's not premature now because we're merely 4 months away from that hearing. And we're less than 6 months away from the next Scottish elections. And the prime part of that is going to be surrounding the referendum. Hypothetical, which is my personal favourite one. Nobody at this point can argue that it's hypothetical. So straight away, there's the first 3 arguments that the UK government have advanced to try and have this kicked out. So it's really been it's been more of a fight to get. What the strategy has been quite simple, and I have to admit I'm extremely angry at the Scottish government about this. A lot of work by the Scottish government over the last number of months has been to deliberately delay and try and have this case kicked out. And I understand, and I have to say this for everybody that watches this, I understand there are many of you out there sitting there saying, oh, the Scottish National have some big master plan that they're just not telling anybody. And I have to say to you, and I don't like doing it because it really bursts the bubble, so to speak, with hopes. That's just complacent thinking. It is really, really, really important that SNP members get it through their head that now is the time they should be applying pressure to their elected representatives and applying pressure to their party to push forward with independence. And I can't stress that. To do anything else is just to be complacent. And there's a very good reason to say that. We invited the Scottish Government into these proceedings. We started with a summons, and the summons listed 3 defenders. The first defender was the Advocate General. That's the UK government. So that's self-explanatory. The next one was the Lord Advocate. And the reason we invited the Lord Advocate is because he would represent the Scottish Parliament. Separately, we invited the Scottish ministers. Now, that's really important. We invited the Scottish ministers separately, as in Nicola Sturgeon in her cabinet, the Scottish National Party cabinet. We invited them separately from the Scottish Parliament in order to ensure that there was no conflict of interest, because the separation of powers dictates, although the Lord Advocate is a member of the Scottish cabinet, while at the same time representing the Scottish Parliament, it's not appropriate for him to be arguing for both parties. And the reason it's not appropriate is because what Parliament wants to advance and what the Scottish Government wants to advance are a lot of the time not exactly the same thing. They don't always match up. But in the initial stages, the Scottish Government decided, we'll just let the Lord Advocate represent us as well. Now, I could go on a rundown and say, the complete arrogance of the Scottish Government and some of the representations, like making statements like it's not for the pursuer to stand in the shoes of parliamentarians, was one statement that was made on their behalf. And I could say that that is completely unacceptable and they knew what they were doing, but I highly suspect they didn't. What I think is that the Scottish Government didn't take enough interest in the subject. They were perhaps a little bit complacent. They said to the Lord Advocate, you just represent us. This is just Joe Bloggs. That is just that pleb from Dunfermline. That'll be that. We'll get this washed out. It'll not be an issue. As things started to get more severe, and then there was the leak, and those comments were released to the public, I think at that point the Scottish Government then looked back at what arguments had been advanced in their name, shall we say, and panicked, and that's when they dropped out. But the Scottish Government's interventions from the start were, they joined in, then they asked for a 3-month delay, and we had to argue against that. Then they tried to have it transferred to a different procedure in order to have it kicked, and the court said, and then when we opposed that, on the very last day they decided to drop it, at which point they asked us to assume our own costs, not just in that, but also in the preceding motion that they made as well. And we began to realise at that point, wait a minute, what's happening here is the Scottish Government are just trying to sling motion after motion after motion to deplete the war chest and also to try and have this kicked. And that was really, at that point, you have to remember there's a lot of correspondence going back and forward as well. So with these legal matters, there's a lot of conversations. There's a lot that I can't discuss, but there's a lot of these conversations. So there's a lot more context.
I've heard senior SNP people quoted as saying, what you're doing is dangerous because let's assume, they say, that you lose, then effectively you've put the case of independence back considerably.
Right. Let me answer that plain, and I'm really glad you brought that up, John. I'm going to put this on the line, and I'm actually going to call out the MSPs and the MPs that have made statements like that this is really dangerous for the independence movement. It's not. And the reason it's not is because it's exactly the same fight that the Scottish National Party would have to have in a number of months' time anyway and begin. But it's going to take them a year and a half, 2 years to have that same fight. And the reason for it is quite simple. Everybody's heard the term Section 30 or Section 30 order. a lot of people don't realise that Section 30 refers to Section 30 of the Scotland Act 1998. That is the act of the UK Parliament that brought the Scottish Parliament into being. It is effectively the rule book on how Holyrood works and how devolution works. But there's a little known section just after it called Section 31.
Yeah.
Section 31 talks about bills and how they are advanced in the Scottish Parliament. The first paragraph of that talks about a declaration that a person putting a bill forward has to make to Parliament, that it is competent for them to put that bill forward. Okay? So say, I'll just pick the first person, John Swinney. John Swinney creates a bill and he wants to put it forward. As a person that's responsible for that bill, he has to make a declaration that is within the competency of the Scottish Parliament to pass that bill. The next paragraph states that the presiding officer needs to make a similar declaration that he believes it to be within the competency of the Scottish Parliament. And if you all recall, we go back to the continuity bill, the one that Westminster kind of screwed the Scottish government on, the reason that ended up in front of the Supreme Court, the reason that ended up in front of the court, I should say, because I think it was the Court of Session. I don't actually think it went to the Supreme Court, did it? Not entirely sure about that. But either way, it doesn't matter. The reason that ended up in court was because the presiding officer stated that he believed that it might not be within the competency of the Scottish Parliament to pass that continuity bill. And that's why it ended up there. Now, the reason I've gone into this technical detail about these declarations that need to be made is because, and it tracks with us, on the day that it was to come out in the paper that this is not for these 7,000 peoples that have crowdfunded this to stand in the shoes of parliamentarians. The day that was due to come out in the press, 4 hours later after it was published, Nicola Sturgeon stood up in the chamber at Holyrood and announced that she was bringing forward a draft bill for an independence referendum. And everybody went, wow, isn't that brilliant? I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but a draft bill is not a bill. It's not a bill until it is physically put to the floor of Holyrood for the MSPs to vote on it. And then once it passes, it becomes an act. She is not beholden to anybody on that bill whatsoever because it is a draft bill. The problem we now have is that when that bill is put forward to actually be passed into law, she is going to have to the Scottish National Party will have to make a declaration saying that that bill is competent to be passed by the Scottish Parliament. The presiding officer will have to make the same declaration. Now, the Scottish government at no point in the last 22 years have tried to actually answer the question of whether the Scottish Parliament can legislate for a referendum without a Section 30 order.
Right.
At no point in the last 22 years have they been able to do that, or have they even tried to do that. So when she goes to try and advance that bill, because she's not got that clarification, the UK government are immediately going to challenge it. And what's going to happen? They're going to end up in a court case, which is exactly the same as the one we're having right now. The only difference is, because we're having it now, it's before, we've already got a year and a half's head start. As far as I'm concerned, the Scottish National Party should have done this 2 years ago, and they didn't. And
I get that point.
Yeah.
Some folks might be slightly confused about how it was possible to have a referendum back in 2014 without this clarification.
Well, that's because that was because Alex Salmond, as First Minister, managed to leverage David Cameron into actually passing a Section 30 order. And the only reason that Alex was able to really do that was because the polls showed that there was a likelihood that we were going to lose. Because we were way down, when we first started, we were way down in 20s and 30%. Yeah. It was only in the last days that Westminster panicked. But they allowed that to happen because because simply they believed they were going to win. Now we have, 12 or 13 polls in a row that say we're going to win, and we've got Boris Johnson. It's a whole different kettle of fish. And what I would say, back in 2014 as well, it wasn't just the fact that they believed they were going to win. It was also really a case of at that time, the likes of Kenny McCaskill and other people in the cabinet believed that we could call a referendum as well at that time without permission from Westminster. So there was very much that if you don't do it, we're going to, we're going to go ahead and do it ourselves anyway. So, it was a different time, a different set of circumstances. But there's many in the Scottish National Party that have been pretty quiet on the subject, have advocated that we could, exactly what we've been advocating since, for years as well, and which we have a legal opinion from in January, to advance this case. But it has, Section 30 has never had an authoritative decision by a court anywhere. It is completely ambiguous. So nobody knows one way or the other. We are choosing now to settle that completely. Is it or is it not? We believe it is.
Which sounds straightforward. So why are so many senior people in the SNP opposed to what you're doing? Why do they think it's dangerous?
When it comes to the danger, and I'll be brutally honest with you, when it comes to the danger here, there is none, because it's going to be an argument that we'd have to have anyway. Any bill that goes through, any referendum that happens without a Section 30 order is a referendum without a Section 30 order, would require this type of legal fight. Okay. It's really as simple as that. There is no downside, because even if we were to lose, and touch wood, we won't, because we've got a very strong position here. But even if we were to lose, we would still know at that point where to deploy our resources. We would know which avenues are closed off to us, so we could then focus all of our resources on another methodology. But the one thing that is never told by the Haidheagians and the SNP is, if we lose, what I have to say is we're trying to advance the position that it is within the competence of the Scottish Parliament to hold a referendum on independence without consent. And this is the important bit, within the law as it currently stands. Right. And there's a reason that's very, very important to say. If we win, then it shows once and for all that it is within the law as it stands legal for Scotland to hold a referendum without getting permission from Westminster. But if we lose, what it does is it shows that UK law is insufficient. UK law itself is against covenants and conventions of treaties that the UK has signed up for, including things like the UN covenant, the United Nations Convention on Civil and Political Rights. Yeah. The right to self-determination is so important that they made it the very first article in that document. It's enshrined in the UN Charter, European Convention.
Sorry to bring you back to this, Martin, but as you know, there's been considerable opposition among senior figures in the SNP. Uh-huh. Why do you think they regard it as dangerous? Because it's one thing to think, well, that this is a nuisance, it's a piece of silliness perhaps, but why could it be dangerous? Oh, okay.
That's not. I shrug the shoulders, and that might look like I'm being a bit sarcastic or thing, but nothing. Okay. And that's not my opinion, by the way. Okay. That's the opinion of some of the top legal minds in the country. Okay. The only thing we can see it is it's either sheer hubris, or it's generally, or it's just a case I don't want people playing in the paddling pool.
Yeah, I mean
that's the only explanation for it.
Yeah, I mean you are, bless your cotton socks, you're in very murky waters. In that there's a strange irony here. Mm-hmm. I suspect the main reason that the 2014 referendum took place is because the UK has no written constitution of the kind that most countries would recognise. So what that means is that two guys, literally two guys, Messrs. Salmond and Cameron, can get together in a less than smoke-filled room and simply say, you know something, I'm up for this if you are. And it can walk away with something that most countries would be regarded as grossly unconstitutional. I mean, for example, in Spain, you couldn't do this because the first article, as I understand it, of the Spanish Constitution says that the integrity of the Spanish state is paramount. You can't modify it or change it in any way, shape, or form. Of course,
that came out of Francoism, so...
Yeah, exactly, which is what you'd expect. Here in the UK, if you want to find out what the Constitution is, you have to hire someone. And even they will come up with a whole bunch of arguments, which are then confounded by another legal view. So, I mean, in many respects, you're doing the only practical thing that you can do when there is no written constitution. You have to say to a bunch of people who ought to be in a position to unscramble some of this stuff, what do you think? Now, it shouldn't be necessary, frankly, because it should be written down in a piece of paper. But it comes to me, what that brings me to is this fundamental point. You said within the law, and I noticed you made that qualifier. And you're a bright guy, so you don't use words loosely. So within the law, presumably that it is then open to the British government to institute a constitutional lock on this. If you win, for example, let's say that you're successful. Yeah. Could they not simply, at Westminster, pass a law that says that decision that we now refuse to accept, and the courts are obliged to obey the law?
This is where getting the arguments out of the way now, rather than waiting until the bill goes to the floor, comes in. If the bill goes to the floor and the UK government challenges it, then the UK government will do exactly what they did with the Continuity Bill. While it's being fought in court, they will modify primary legislation at Westminster to bring it out of competency. However, if we do the argument now, then if the UK government tries to pass law, then the shoe's on the other foot. The Scottish government gets the opportunity to challenge it, providing they have been fast enough in putting even a placeholder bill through or a placeholder document through. Bearing in mind, if they put a bill forward after, say we get a win, and then they advance a bill, they can get it through straight away because the UK government has nothing to contest because the court's already ruled that such a bill would be competent. So if the UK government then tries to pass a law which would undermine that bill, well, you know the rule under when it comes to constitutional matters, powers legislated for are powers that are legislated for at Holyrood are, as far as the UK government, they're not concerned, they're not allowed to touch it. So at that point, the Scottish government could then challenge anything that the UK government could do. Yeah. And the courts, to be perfectly honest with you, the courts on several occasions, sorry, there was a bit of break up there. The courts have made it clear that they, particularly in that case with the Continuity Bill, they've made it clear that they don't like the idea of the UK government deliberately trying to modify laws at Westminster in order to undermine bills that are being passed at Holyrood. So, it puts us in certainly puts Scotland in a stronger position if we get this argument out of the way now with relation to, wrangles that could happen later on.
I think that makes sense, it seems to me. But of course, anyone watching this who feels that what Martin is saying, and which I appear to be agreeing with, they want to challenge that, then they're free to come on the show and tell us why. Of course. And that's to be encouraged.
Of course, at the end of the day, it comes down to, yeah. Well, that's the thing. We've not hidden anything. Nothing at all. I mean, it was Ian Blackford was interviewed the other day. In fact, he was actually asked about this case, and he deliberately deflected. He did not answer the question whatsoever. You could see there's one pundit referred to it as the cognitive dissonance going on in his head at the time when he was asked that question. For our part, we're completely open and honest about it. We've published every single document to do with the case, so people are free to peruse it and free to raise their own, their own questions about it. And I have tried my best because it's a very complex subject matter, to answer as many questions as I can, and I will continue doing so.
Because you're absolutely right. Power devolved is power retained.
That's the phrase I was looking for. Thank you for that.
And what we may find is that will be exercised in its rawest form when the next referendum is proposed. Because, I mean, I've interviewed lots of people on the other side of the independence debate on the TNT show, and almost to a man and a woman, their view is that the reason that the present London government is opposed to a referendum is because they are absolutely terrified they're going to lose it. So therefore, the only way to avoid losing a referendum is to make sure one never happens. And then you're copper bottom then.
Yes.
Politically, of course, you're into the biggest mare's nest you can ever imagine constitutionally, but politically and constitutionally. But it seems to me what tends to, if we go back over history and look at other movements of secession, the United States, etc., the winner tends to be the group that's assertive. I.e., if you're assertive and you require the other guy to come onto your turf, the likelihood is that your arguments will be seen to be more convincing. I think if you're in any way reluctant, then that reluctance is seized upon and manipulated. That's a purely historical perspective. It's got nothing to do necessarily with this particular case.
I would say it's accurate. I would say it's 100% accurate. Yeah.
So you've been successful in moving the process along. It's a great tribute to you guys. I mean, it's a great achievement because if things aren't clear, somebody has to try and clarify them. I mean, obviously, if you want to move on. So, just to summarise where we are just now, where would you say we are right now with the case?
Right at this moment. Well, we had one hearing which was on a protected expenses order, but we didn't get the protected expenses order. But what we did get was a victory with one of the judges saying that it had a good chance of success. The previous hearing that we just had at the start of November was specifically to do with what's called the by-order rule hearing. It was to do with further procedure. The UK government wanted it to be done one way. The Lord Advocate wanted it to be done another way. The Scottish government had jumped ship and wanted it done another way. And we had, our preference was a full hearing of all the matters to put them to the judges. That hearing, basically, the different position for the Lord Advocate and the UK government, the Advocate General, was that they wanted each of the different pleas, the different matters, a little hearing, a little hearing, a little hearing, a little hearing, and then if we make it past all those little hearings, then we'll have the big hearing. We argued, no, we want everything argued at the same time, on the same day, over a 2-day block. No ifs, buts, or maybes. The reason they were saying to have little hearings is because each one of those hearings requires preparation, cost, resources, time, money. So that basically increases the work from 1-fold to 5-fold. Whereas what we were doing is we want everything heard together. And Lady Carmichael ruled in our favour. So it's game on now. There'll be no more daft little procedures here, there, or trying to disassemble everything and argue it at a better time. They're effectively a legal quagmire. Yeah. We are going to a 2-day hearing period. And to expedite that process, there are currently written arguments being exchanged as well. So we write to them, they then write up and back, and it's going to go on like that for a number of weeks. So we reckon that by January, the substantive hearing will call in court, and it will be a 2-day hearing, and it'll be public as well. So people can actually listen into that as well, as the previous hearing was as well.
So just to recap, so you reckon this hearing will take place sometime in January, perhaps?
That's what we're expecting. It's 4 weeks from the last hearing to exchange different written arguments, and then there's a 2-week grace period, and that's going to bring us to Christmas, New Year. So we expect it to be one of the first cases back after the new year. That's, because obviously you get that break where there's nothing happening in the court as well. So we're saying mid-January is a good estimate for where we want to be.
They are, folks. There's a date for you now, mid-January.
But yeah, it's effectively, it was the last hearing was effectively, I know enough of the time wasting. Let's get this going, so to speak. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. That's for sure. It's game on now, and it seems to have caused a bit of a panic with the unionist press because it was reported in a number of them. So in fact, we actually know for a fact that it has been reported in the United States by Bloomberg as well. In fact, I believe they're actually in the process of writing a rather large article about it at the moment as well. So, it's at the end of the day, the case itself, yes, it'll bring clarification to the Constitution. Yes, it will hopefully establish the precedent that a Section 30 order is not required. But at the same time as well, it's also shaking the branches as well. And I would hope, my greatest hope for it, is that it shows people out there that, listen, you don't need to be a high convoluted politician with massive resources to try and steer and push and try and advance the cause. All you need is yourself, a laptop computer, or a tablet and your own voice. And I would hope that,
and also sparing your blushes. You need tenacity. You need to stick with it.
Yeah.
When lots of other people are saying to you, give up, don't do it, it's a hassle, who the heck are you, blah, blah, blah.
I don't have those words in my vocabulary. I never have. 10 years of being consistently kicked by the system due to ill health and other matters as well that in my private life to do with my health and also my mother. Effectively falling through every single crack on the system on the way down. It gave me a vision of exactly how bad things can get. And because I knew a bit about, I was fairly well versed in the basics of law. That led to actually trying to help people, things like DWP claims and all that sort of stuff. And when you've been to that dark place, and I have absolutely no qualms in calling it the dark place, because you'll never understand how bad the system is until you see exactly how badly people that are treated, that are normally hidden from sight by the same system. Yeah. It'll either do one or two things to you. It'll either break you, or it will turn your mind to screw this, going down swinging attitude. And that's effectively where it came from. You could very well say that this case is being brought by me because I'm a product of the very same system, so to speak. But it's the realization that, in actual fact, there are ways that the ordinary person can really, try to shift things on. And there's nothing, there's nothing like the smell of panic in the morning when it comes to politicians when they realise, because our system, the entire system in the UK is predicated on this sort of mission to ensure that the electorate never realise how much power they actually have. It's the same model that's actually used by the police, and I shouldn't say that. A police officer explained it brilliantly to me. He says to me, we're outnumbered by about 10,000 to 1. Our entire system of policing works on the basis that the public has trust in us, and that we have the people secede to our authority. They acquiesce to our authority. But if they suddenly turn around and says, you know what? No, I'm not doing that anymore, we'd be royally, was the words he used. And it's exactly the same with government. It's exactly the same with this country. Politicians and pundits that believe that, that's how they work. By trying to hide from you that you are more powerful than you actually think you are.
Yeah. I'm reminded too of that old saying. I think they use it particularly in the US about if the law is on your side, argue the law. If the law is not on your side, but the facts are, argue the facts. If neither the law nor the facts are on your side, shout. and don't let the other guy come back. We're almost in that.
I think one of the best ones I ever heard was the TV program Boston Legal. It was just a lawyer. He says, "There's 3 things you should know about me. I'm 100% vindictive, and I don't play fair." And the guy responded back to him, "That's 2 things." He says, "See, I'm not playing fair already." It's just one of those subtle sayings, but that's the thing. The only trick that's out there is that it's a mind trick. It's a shell. The entire system in this country is based on as freely giving everything over to the politicians and just saying, "Yeah, you represent us," and that balance completely relies on us acquiescing to the system. But if we turn around and say, no, I'm not doing this anymore, take your system and shove it, suddenly there's this mass panic. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping that comes out of this case, that people do realise, actually, one person can do X, Y, Z, can shift things this way and that way. Imagine what would happen if 2 of us got together, or 3, or 50, or 1,000, or 50,000. And I genuinely believe that if that's the one thing that comes out of this, it tries and instills that sort of opinion in people that, in actual fact, it doesn't matter who you are, you can actually make a bit of a difference to the entire thing as a whole, then great. Great.
I gather in the recent past you've approached Laura Kuenssberg. Is that the case?
Yeah, we've I'm in a bit of a shooting match with her at the moment. You could say that, yeah. I've made a formal complaint to the BBC Director General about her reporting. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
Right ahead.
Yeah, I've had 2. I've put one complaint forward with regard to the authority that the BBC reporters seem to use when they turn around and say with great gusto that a Section 30 order is required. And here's the legal opinion. And because it's one myth that is perpetuated by the UK media, is that a Section 30 order is required. It's not required. It's up to the UK government to prove that it is required. As far as we're concerned, it's not. So yeah, I raised the issue with the BBC Director General about Laura Kuenssberg. She doubled down, she doubled down by putting another article up that referred to legal opinion that they'd got, which was actually 3 months before we initiated the legal action. And it quoted Philip Sim. There's just one downside to that. Philip Sim's on the mailing list for the press releases for this court case. So she kind of shot herself in the foot there. So yeah, we'll see what comes out of that. But yeah, required. My attitude is, no, it isn't. Yeah. It's not required. And the reason no, it's not required is because, well, here's the court summons and here's the closed record, and we know it's not required because our court summons says so. So
yeah, Martin, the connection's starting to deteriorate. I'm not quite sure where, but I think we probably ventilated most of the things that are worth covering. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Any thoughts about crowdfunders or anything else that you want?
Well, when it comes to the crowdfunding at the moment, we're fine on that front just now. I've been very clear on that. I won't ask about crowdfunding until we need it. Simple as that. All I would say with regards to the case itself is just keep watching this space. But not just watching the case itself. Watch what's happening round about the case. because one thing that this case is doing is shaking a lot of branches, and there's a lot of things that are coming to the fray and coming to the fold, so pay close attention to it. But apart from that, really it's simply a case of waiting till the hearing. I'll be making my usual updates online.
Okay. Well, there you are, folks. If you want to know
to everybody, as and when I get new information.
If you want to know how the court case is going, then Martin's the guy to be in touch with. There's also Forward as One, the website. There's lots of great information there. And again, if anyone watching this wants to contest or challenge, contact me, john@cleash.com. You're welcome to come on the TNT show. Martin has been very candid. He's been tenacious. I think it's been his best performance all round. But other people might not agree. In that case, the TNT place, the Nation Talks, is your space to say what you need to say. Let me end by thanking you most sincerely, Martin, for giving up your time. Much appreciated. And the best of luck. Thanks again. Good night, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, John. Take it easy.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
We know you're busy people, so most of our shows are also on demand on our Scottish Independence podcast channel, available wherever you get your podcasts. You'll see what a great variety of shows we have. There's something for everyone. Our newest on-demand platform is IndyLive Radio's YouTube channel. We have set up playlists for our most popular shows and current topics, currency, list parties. New content is added almost daily, so subscribe and you won't miss anything. Join us. Thanks for listening.
IndyLive Radio.
It's not acceptable to say we just keep on trying and we have another mandate and we have another mandate, we keep on trying. You've got to make a political judgment that it's not going to work and say, well, in that case, we have either got to admit that we're not going to go for independence. And this is where I think the government has not been honest with people. That is, I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying that it is at least a possibility. If we hone in totally on Section 30, we could not get a referendum at all under Section 30. And therefore, that to me means that you've got to find another way.
But I don't think anybody who's gone over to yes now is really for moving, because I think they can see clear as day what things look like. And I always felt that during the independence referendum that it would take a no vote in order for a lot of Scots to realise the consequences of voting no. They would have to see what happens when they vote no in order to realise what a mistake it was.
And to me, that's the clear blue water between staying in the UK and going for independence. It's clear, regardless of what Boris Johnson said the other day, that they will want to go back to business as usual, where the ultra-rich are the ones who gain from everything. We don't want to be part of that. We want the chance to actually build a fairer country.
It's the Brexit stuff for me, the nepotism stuff for me, breaking international law stuff for me, the ERG hijacking UK democracy stuff for me, education is a luxury stuff for me, £9,000 tuition a year stuff for me. It's the NHS on the table for a US trade deal stuff for me, demonising the working classes stuff for me, refusing starving children free school meals stuff for me. It's Boris calling Muslim women letterboxes stuff for me, his pickaninnies comments stuff for me, his bum boys comments stuff for me, his Scotland is a verminous race comments stuff for me, the UK internal market bill ripping up the devolution settlement stuff for me, devolved legislators being ignored during Brexit stuff for me, a lack of UK leadership during COVID stuff for me, nuclear weapons being in Scotland stuff for me, a decade of Tory governments Scotland didn't elect stuff for me. It's a weak left opposition in England stuff for me, attempting to frame independence as anti-English bigotry stuff for me. It's trying to ban anti-capitalist references in schools stuff for me. It's England-centric lefties painting SNP as a protest vote even though Scottish Labour is spineless stuff for me. It's the UK for me.
Film, you can watch this again, you can be part of it. It's Independence Live. Yeah. A few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
Here we are, it's the Yackin Bridge where we started the first 500 miles. In front of that beast there. This is where it all started. We're now on day 4 and we're heading towards Portree. We'll see he's on the road. Sign the covenant. Long walk to freedom. Talk to you later.
Hi there, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Russ.
And we're from the Veterans for Scottish Independence 2.0 group. And we're just invading your privacy today to let you know that we will be very shortly pushing a programme out on live stream to do with the veterans, their needs as it will be during an independent campaign. The next independence campaign, and indeed in an independent Scotland.
So get yourself in gear, come and join us, pull up a sandbag.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On Guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
saw you weeping outside the seat of power. As you reflected on Scotland's wilting flower, a new horizon was all that really mattered. But dawn had broken as dreams and hopes lay shattered. The eye of the storm grew Wednesday in the meadows. The troops were gathering as Alva's future led us. Sing freedom's anthems, all nations join together. We shall be heard, our chains released forever. Don't give up hoping and don't despair. The winds of change are blowing and careless on its way. A sea of soul tiles were sailing in the sky. Oh, proudly saying close to success, a bright new future rising. Lies and deceit from traitors was surprising. You showed the way and gave us inspiration. The seeds are sown to once more be a nation. Don't give up hoping and don't despair. The winds of change are blowing and careless on its way. A sea of soul tiles were sailing in the sky. Oh, proudly saying
It's a song I wrote about 5 minutes ago called Carpe Diem, Hope Over Fear.
Are you threatened by words from an empire of money and gold? Will you trade in your country's potential for the lies you've been sold? Are you scared that the walls are too high to be breached by the bold? Will you stand and be counted or shut up and do what you're told? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Did the TV man call you a nationalist for rejecting the lies? Are the wolves of the few off the bob cause they wear shirts and ties? When they tell you that Scotland's no great, are you really surprised? Will you stand and be counted for something that money can't buy? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Happy that nuclear weapons are dumped on the Clyde, fighting wars for the wealth of the few. How many have died? You can bury my bones, but the truth of it can't be denied. Will you stand and be counted, cause I'll be there stood by your side. Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Will the media tell you that England don't want you to go? And the taxpayer-funded MPs tell you just tell them no. No, but in Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, they already know that we're fighting for them, and it's only the start of the show. Ha ha! Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, my friend, will you seize the day? With the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Vote yes for a future. Hope over fear.
It's the Brexit stuff for me, the nepotism stuff for me, breaking international law stuff for me, the ERG hijacking UK democracy stuff for me, education is a luxury stuff for me, £9,000 tuition a year stuff for me, it's the NHS on the table for a US trade deal stuff for me, demonising the working classes stuff for me, refusing starving children free school meals stuff for me, it's Boris calling Muslim women letterboxes stuff for me, his pickaninnies comments stuff for me, his bum boys comments stuff for me, his Scotland is a verminous race comments stuff for me, the UK internal market bill ripping up the devolution settlement stuff for me, devolved legislators being ignored during Brexit stuff for me, a lack of UK leadership during COVID stuff for me, nuclear weapons being in Scotland stuff for me, a decade of Tory governments Scotland didn't elect stuff for me, it's a weak left opposition in England stuff for me, attempting to frame independence as anti-English bigotry stuff for me, it's trying to ban anti-capitalist references in schools stuff for me, it's England-centric lefties painting SNP as a protest vote even though Scottish Labour is spineless stuff for me, it's the UK for me.